What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make segmented blanks that you can then turn on the lathe into segmented bowls. So let's get started. As like any other project, you need to select your material. So I've selected walnut and cherry for mine. The majority of the bowl is going to be walnut, but there's going to be some cherry accents, as you probably saw in the thumbnail. So I've set my fence on my table saw to 2 1/4 inches, and what this is going to do is determine the thickness of the walls of our segmented blank. So now that you've got your 4 pieces of walnut cut to 2 1/4 inches wide, we're going to head over to the miter saw and bevel our blade to 15 degrees, and that's how we're going to cut our segments. So now that you've got your blade at 15 degrees, I like to cut one end of my walnut at 15 degrees. So normally if we were going to be making an 8-inch 12-segment bowl, we would cut this long side here at 2 1/4 inches, and then we would come back with our angle going inward like a V. But we are going to be inserting 1/4 inch pieces of cherry in between each one. So I'm going to cut this long side here at 2 inches, and then again we'll just taper our 15-degree angle back. So as you can see, I've got a little mark here representing 2 inches down from this corner. I'm going to lower my blade down until it's right on that mark, and then we're going to butt a piece of 2x4 up against here as a stop block. And now comes the very repetitive part of cutting up all of our walnut into 2-inch pieces, remembering to flip it every time. And I would say the most critical part of this process is making sure that you cut your pieces in the right direction. You want them to be a trapezoid. You do not want your pieces to be a parallelogram like this. If it's a parallelogram, it's not going to work. It has to be a trapezoid, which is why you have to flip your piece every single time you cut. So now what you're going to want to do is measure the long side of your angle that you just cut. So for me, that's about 2 1/4 inches. Now I'm going to head back to the table saw and cut some cherry to 2 1/4 inches wide. Alright, so back at the miter saw, I've set up a stop block over here so that I can cut a whole bunch of 1/4 inch long pieces from our 2 strips of cherry. And in total, you're going to need about 36 pieces of cherry if you're going to have 3 rings high and 12 segments in each ring. So guys, while I'm cutting up all of our thin pieces of cherry, I just thought this would be a good time to tell you that I do have a website now. SethCustomCreations.com. The link will be in the description down below. I've got products on there, more information about me, and a lot of other stuff you might be interested in. So I'd highly encourage you to go check that out. Thanks. So I've cut up some more cherry here, this time at 2 1/4 inches wide. Now what we're going to do is we're going to cut segments out of this 15 degrees, but the long side is going to be 2 1/4 inches instead of the 2 inches that we did the walnut. So I've brought everything down to the basement here just for a little bit better lighting, and it's easier to control the temperature for the glue drying, but I'm going to try and lay this out as simply as I can so that way you don't get too confused. And I'll put a full cut list in the description of this video in case you want to make a bowl similar to mine. So for every piece of walnut that you have, you want to take one of your thin pieces of cherry and glue it onto one edge. You don't want to put a piece of cherry on the other edge or else you'll ruin it. You only want to put a cherry on one edge. Now I'm going to demonstrate how I glue these together. So I start by putting just a little bit of glue on one side. You can spread that around. Make sure you cover the entire thing with glue. Like that. Then you can turn it on its side, and what you want to do is slide them back and forth like this. And that'll create almost an airtight seal, and that'll hold the piece on there instantly. Now, as for the thick cherry pieces, we're just going to start out by gluing 2 pieces of cherry together to create pairs. And again, let's just do that with all your cherry pieces. So once all your halves are dry, you're going to want to take 2 of them and glue them together just like that. So now that I've got all my pairs of walnut glued up, I'm going to take my cherry and do the exact same thing, just gluing up 2 of them together. And when you glue together your pairs of 2, you do want to leave some not glued because you're going to need these to make half rings. If you don't do this, you'll have a bunch of sets of 4, and that will not create a half ring. So I continued gluing up all my walnut and cherry until I had these half rings that go together just like this. Now the reason why we make half rings is because we can put these things on the belt sander like this, sanding the faces here, and that way when we sand both faces on both rings, they go together perfectly without any gaps. So that's what we're going to do right now, and then we'll go ahead and glue these together. So once all these are dry, you can go ahead and run them through the planer. Now I know it sounds a little bit sketchy, a little bit dangerous, but I do feel comfortable doing what I'm doing. Now what we're going to do is head over to the table saw with our 2 rings of solid cherry, and we're going to resaw them right down the middle, and then we should be left with 4 equal thickness rings. And in order to minimize danger as much as possible, I like to start with my blade really low, and I gradually raise it up as I can cut around the ring. So the safer way to cut your rings would be to make some sort of a jig for the bandsaw and then just resaw them that way. I don't actually have a bandsaw that's capable of cutting something this thick, but luckily I'm getting a brand new bandsaw tomorrow. Super excited about it. That's the first thing I'm going to do is make a jig to cut these segmented rings. And right off the saw, there's a lot of saw marks and stuff on there, so we're going to run them back through the planer and get them to our desired thickness of 1/4 inch. So we're back in the basement right now, and now we're going to start stacking up our rings and gluing them together. And you want to make sure you glue them together in the orientation that you like. As you can see, I'm going to be gluing mine together like bricks. And just spread that glue around real good. So I've got glue on all of my layers, and they're all in the orientation that I like. And pro tip, let them sit there for 15 or 20 minutes. Let that glue kind of set up a little bit, and then put on your clamps. If you put the glue on there and put your clamps on, those things are going to slide all over the place, and you're going to have a nightmare time trying to get everything lined up. So I just let them sit for 15 or 20 minutes, let the glue set up, and then they don't move when you go to put your clamps on. So we'll let that dry, we'll sand all the glue off one side, and then we'll glue our bottom on there. So now our blank is dry, and I cut this piece of walnut on the bandsaw that we're just going to glue onto the bottom for our base. And I'll just stick some clamps on that. So I got all my clamps on, and one last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to glue this little sacrificial block on there that we can put our faceplate on. And so guys, when your walnut base and your waist block dry, this thing is ready to go on the lathe. Guys, this is my first time actually trying to do a brick pattern bowl. I've done a staggered pattern, I've done checkerboard pattern, but I think this brick pattern is going to look really cool. Be sure to follow me on Instagram to see when this bowl gets turned. There's also a lot of behind the scenes stuff and stuff that doesn't get put up on my YouTube channel over on my Instagram. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and also hit that notification bell next to the subscribe button. There's a lot of good content coming up in the spring and the summer on the channel, and you guys are not going to want to miss it. And again, guys, I'll put a cut list down in the description below in case you want to make a bowl similar to mine. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next week.